Hi, everybody. If you're subscribed, thank you. If you're not subscribed and you just happen to find me, I hope you'll hit that button and help us out here. Uh, I think that Kilmar Garcia is possibly no longer alive in El Salvador. That might be one of the reasons why we can't even get proof of life. They won't let us see him. They're saying now, well, they've never been asked by anybody in the administration to release him or make him available. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen has gone to El Salvador and he's met with the vice president there, and he's demanding that we release Mr. Garcia because he's there illegally. He was not in the United States illegally. He's a man from Maryland, by the way, so he is a constituent of Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen. And it seems the only reason he was picked up and thrown into and sent to El Salvador, who, by the way, we are paying for them to imprison people. But we don't know what happens to them. We don't know what the conditions are. We somehow can't get to them and have them release. The Supreme Court, all 9 members of the Supreme Court, including those appointed by Trump, they unanimously said, Mr. Garcia must be sent home. You cannot pick innocent people off the street, claim they're here illegally, and ship them off to El Salvador to some prison camp, and then we never hear from them again. So J.D. Vance, who is an absolute jerk, is now responding to people who are saying, why isn't the administration adhering to the orders by the Supreme Court? And so, of course, you've heard that the excuse is, well, El Salvador says they're not going to be sending back a terrorist to the United States. They can't do that. Well, Garcia is not a terrorist. He's not a gang member. He's not a criminal. He has tattoos, so they're claiming he's a gang member. Well, our Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, has some very disturbing tattoos. We going to send him to El Salvador? So I think it's very possible that Garcia is dead. Because at this point, they should at least be letting Senator Van Hollen see him. We need proof of life. We need proof of life. There's something very sinister going on here that we are now ignoring what the Supreme Court says. So it's been suggested, I've seen on social media, people are saying he should be gathering every bit of information he can and evidence he can and get an affidavit, maybe by the vice president of El Salvador, to be used later in a contempt of court case or hearing, which should happen. Trump obviously should be sued for this. This is simply not, we're in uncharted territory here, but we need to prepare ourselves to use every weapon in our arsenal to fight this. Because if this is allowed to stand, that means that Trump, and we know he wants to do this, can pull any of us off the street, decide on his own without due process that we are a criminal, and send us to El Salvador. In fact, he even said as much. He said, now we're going to be doing it for U.S. citizens. He just claims it's outsourcing. But we're outsourcing sending people to El Salvador in prisons, and we have no way to deal with them after that. In the United States, when someone's in prison, the courts can weigh in. All kinds of things can happen. What's happening now with this? And there is such a fire hose of chaos with Trump that it's hard for people to keep up and decide which is important. Well, it's all important, but this is hair on fire. I know that's a term I use a lot. But the reason Trump is doing this and defying the Supreme Court, he wants to make sure he wants to see which one of them actually go further, stand up to him. Clarence Thomas. This is pretty unbelievable. So he's daring somebody to do something, anything, knowing that they won't. We can still use the courts. Like I said, sue him for contempt of court, whatever it is that we can do. But at this point, Senator Van Hollen should probably refuse to leave El Salvador until he at a minimum gets proof of life. They need to let him see and talk to Mr. Garcia. Because I think there's something very bad going on here. So they're stalling things in El Salvador. They're saying until they need more time, or they don't have the paperwork. Well, why hasn't the Trump administration done what they need to do? They're saying that they can't do anything until they get somebody from the embassy, the U.S. embassy involved. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And JD Vance is saying, "Oh, we can't, we can't invade. You expect us to invade El Salvador to retrieve Mr. Garcia?" And I put on Twitter, "Pretend it's Greenland, you jerk." Except I think I might have called him a word that starts with an A and ends with hole. So our own government, our own leaders are doing everything they can to stand in the way of a person who is illegally dragged off the streets and shipped to a third world country, a prison labor camp. That's called a concentration camp, folks. That's not a prison. No due process. Once you go in, you can't get out. We can't even get proof of life. This is something that I think the global community needs to get involved in, because the fact that we can't even get proof of life, the fact that we know the conditions in the South Salvadoran prison are far worse than even the worst U.S. prisons, and we have no say and no control and no knowledge about what happens. And Trump is now saying that he'll send U.S. born prisoners, Americans there, without due process. Folks, do you know what this means? This means, now I've been a target of Trump's. I started being a target of Trump's in 2015 and 2016. And if you know anything about my history, you know he did some pretty horrible things. Now, back then, it was hard to talk about because it sounded crazy. Now the world knows what he is. So everything that happened to me, you're like, well, yeah, of course, because now it's happening to the rest of the country. I was the canary in the coal mine. I know what he's capable of. This means that if Trump decides that he doesn't like what I say here on YouTube or on my podcast or on Twitter, he can just decide that I'm a criminal, have me dragged off and sent to El Salvador. And if I'm no longer important to him because he's got bigger fish to fry, but at one point I was a great big threat to him, but his buddies in the media covered for him, namely Jeff Zucker from CNN and Fox News, Roger Ailes, because Trump told them to pull me from the air. And if they hadn't, I guarantee you Trump wouldn't have lasted another 2 weeks in that Republican primary. So the corruption has been around for a while. Now it's just massive, and we see it out in the open. So I know what he's capable of. I think what he really wants to do is ship off Liz Cheney to an El Salvadorian prison. I think he wants to I think he'd like to have Adam Schiff dragged off the Senate floor, decide that he's a criminal, no due process, and ship him off to one of these concentration camps that he's paying for in El Salvador. I think there's a number of people that he'd like to do that to. And if you think it can't happen here, just think of all the things that have happened already that this guy's done, that this evil, evil dictator has done. That we said, well, that can't happen in America. Well, it can. And it has. And it is happening. It is happening. So to say that Mr. Garcia is a gang member and a criminal, he's not. His apprehension and arrest was a mistake. Trump knows this. He doesn't care. So it could be one or both of these things. He wants to see how far he can take this, because if he gets away with this, watch out, folks. He's going to go for it. It will start happening. So he wants to see how much pushback there is. And we're trying, but are we doing everything we can? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say no. He wants to see what his own Supreme Court will do. They voted in favor of ordering the release and return of Mr. Garcia, 9-0. And Trump is still flipping them the bird. This is terrifying. So there's, I'm sure, more tools in the tool shed that can be used that I'm aware of. But using the courts now, right now, I think the focus is on Senator Van Hollen, Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, who is in El Salvador. He's been sending back video, and they're giving him the runaround. I've been saying this for the last couple of days since I first heard that he was planning on going there, that at a minimum, get proof of life and demand it and make it clear that if they refuse, okay, they're not going to let him bring Garcia home. They're not going to release him. So I think that he should make it very clear that he and many, many others will assume if they can't show proof of life, show him Garcia, then they're going to assume that he's dead. And we will consider that a war crime or a crime against humanity. And we will blame the president of El Salvador, and we will blame Donald Trump. And that is something that we cannot let up on. We need to make it clear. Right now, everybody seems to be like tiptoeing around the language. We still do that with Trump. That's what's just insane to me. People say, well, we're headed towards a dictatorship. Folks, we're there. We are there. We are there. This is no longer about changing the hearts of mind of MAGA. If you have people in your circle who are still MAGA, that's the same as being a Hitler sympathizer. And that is not hyperbole. Are we the frog that's been boiled slowly where we don't see what's happening or we get so used to it? Some of us have been out there on the front lines for a long time. And early on, people thought what we were saying was hyperbole. Well, I, for one, was an early victim of Trump's, to the point where one night when I was living in New York, I get a late night call saying Trump has guys in Queens and they might be on their way over to harm you. Because I criticized Trump on TV, so he gets me kicked off. But also, I publicly confirmed an already published report in the Washington Post. I was not the source. That Trump had a super PAC and was lying about self-funding. Corey Lewandowski told me all about that super PAC. Plus, the Washington Post reporting was accurate, and they had it. I mean, Trump attended two of the fundraisers for it. One of the fundraisers was held at Jared Kushner's mother's house, and she seeded it $100,000. His father at that time was barred from giving to the super PAC because he was a convicted felon who had served time. He's since been pardoned and been given a big job by Trump. This is corruption to its core. Now, most of Trump's corruption is just about enriching himself. But we're in different territory here. We are in different territory. I think a lot of MAGA think it's okay because, well, you know, it's somebody with the last name Garcia. They might have been here illegally, but they're not really one of us. And we really want to get rid of all those brown people. So it's racism. But folks, Trump is testing the waters with this so he can go after other people. And it won't stop with people who are just critics of Trump's. And that's what MAGA needs to understand. They're already pissed off because they thought that Trump's economic policies would help them and only hurt the people they don't like. A lot of them have lost their jobs. They're losing their livelihoods. They can't afford the rising price of food. Trump promised to bring down inflation. He hasn't. It's raising. It's going up. His tariffs are costing each family an average of $4,000 a year. Life in the United States is changed now for a very, very long time, because even if Trump were gone tomorrow, to undo the damage that he's done and the wealth that has been lost in this country, except to him, he and his small band of oligarchs have made even more money at our expense. That's how you become an oligarch. He doesn't care about MAGA. He doesn't care about the United States. He's out for revenge. He wants to be Putin, who's one of the wealthiest men in the country because he basically steals from all the Russians. Trump likes to cause pain. Trump likes to hurt people. Trump likes to see people sick and dead and suffering. A lot of people can't relate to that because that's not how we are. But Putin is, Adolf Hitler was, and that is why the comparisons to Trump to Adolf Hitler are dead on. This isn't, oh, everybody I don't like is Hitler. You remember how the MAGA like to do that? We're at the point now where the rank and file, toothless, red hat wearing, rally going MAGA people aren't really a threat. Unless they vote for him again, if we actually have free and fair elections, which I think is, we better not count on it. They served a useful purpose for Trump, but now the focus is on bigger, I guess, bigger fish. And I think that there are lawmakers and officials in this country who are at great risk. You saw how Trump has gone after law firms. Law firms, just because they represented people who were suing him or prosecuting him. He's a convicted felon. Trump is a criminal. He's a lifelong criminal. He got away with it when he was just a jerk con man in New York because he had everybody threatened and bought off. All those people in New York that let him off the hook all those years, and now they go on MSNBC like they're big anti-Trump warriors. They were part of the problem, folks. Trump bought off or threatened a lot of judges in New York would never, they would never side with somebody suing Trump because they're afraid of Trump. They would decide to bump it to appeals because they just didn't want to deal with it. Remember what he did to the judge who ruled against him in the Trump University case? Yeah. He was pretty racist about that. Made his life hell. So for years in New York, that's what happened. For years. I was in DC yesterday closing on a real estate deal and heard a nightmare story about Trump from back before he was in politics. He's a crook. He's a thief. And then the domino effect where a business had to close because of him. And then some of the things that happened after that. Donald Trump has been ruining people's lives for decades. The rest of the country didn't start figuring that out until he got into politics. And even then, some people thought, well, as long as it's not happening to them and they get something out of it, they'll go along with it. A lot of the people that worked for him in his first administration that then pretended they saw the light. And then when it became very convenient for them to suddenly get on TV and sell books, they've always known who and what he was. And everybody, some of these now never Trumpers that when it became convenient for them to get some fame and fortune by banking on, like, I don't know, their ex-wife's fame when, with Trump. They were friends with Trump, but then they were with Cruz. And then when the Cambridge Analytica people with the big money moved to Trump, they moved with him, and then they were pro-Trump, celebrating when he won. And then when someone didn't get either of the two jobs that he wanted in the Trump administration, he suddenly becomes never Trump and suddenly becomes famous for clever tweets and gets a little bit of a TV career there. Trump could have been stopped at any point along the way over these past 9 years. And the people who could have done so refused. And they were not helping those of us who were fighting Trump, legitimately fighting Trump, putting it all on the line. They all thought, no, it'll be okay. Well, or as long as they weren't the ones being hurt, or as long as they had a super PAC and they were able to build generational wealth and, basically they basically have the Democratic House majority and sitting in their bank accounts because they pocketed the money rather than, building Democrat majority in the House 5 years ago. We are in this position now because Trump is a lifelong criminal and con man. And the one thing he does know is that everybody has their price. He knows. He knew that Nancy Pelosi, once she decided not to impeach him over obstruction of justice in the Mueller report, he knew. And she could tear up, the copy of his speech behind him on camera at the State of the Union and do all that, but she didn't do her job with impeaching. She said, he's not worth it. We'll let voters decide. Well, yeah, he was president. He was worth it. And Mueller going along with the OLC memo. It wasn't law that a president can't be indicted. It was an OLC memo. So Trump knows where that line is because we've shown him. He knew how to give great ratings to the TV networks so that if he did the unthinkable, which is order someone to be kicked off, and that was just not something any presidential campaign could ever do, or they'd risk being exposed on that. But it worked for Trump because he was ratings gold. So he knows every step along the way. His timing is impeccable. He knows when to knock down the guardrails because he's seen it happen. He's seen it happen. He knows. And I think it's pretty clear he even faked his assassination attempt, and he knows that we know it, so he rubs our face in it by having statues of himself from that event and big portraits of himself hanging in the White House of that event. He's daring us. He's daring us to challenge him. He's daring Democrats in the Senate, the House, to challenge him, or some other entity, maybe to sue him for evidence, sue for the medical reports, the real medical reports, not Ronnie Jackson, whatever his name is, the drug dealer from Trump's first administration. He has pushed the envelope enough where I think we were all shocked that there wasn't more pushback from people that we thought were strong. Trump was counting on the weakness of our institutions and our lack of a backbone that we all thought is so strong in America. Well, you know who knew it was weak? Vladimir Putin. And I think Putin's been coaching him all along, letting him know where the fault lines were. That we wave the flag and we're all patriotic, but when the chips are down, we didn't fight him. You can blame Comey. Okay, he did a stupid thing. Merrick Garland is the most guilty of this. A lot of people in the media, people in law enforcement, everybody stepped out of the way. They didn't want to be the ones to stand up to him because, frankly, they didn't want to see happen to them what happened to me and what happened to others, where you get ruined. Well, now people are going to get worse than ruined. They're going to be dying. So I think one hope that I have is that the Supreme Court, now that they are being made fools of, that maybe it'll be harder for Trump to get his way in the future. I don't know if that matters now or not, but right now, all the focus is on Mr. Garcia being held in El Salvador and a senator on the ground who's our point person. So keep them both in your prayers.